In honor of The Walking Dead's pilot airing 14 years ago today and the channel surpassing 1,000 subscribers, I decided it was finally time to create a video that I've wanted to make for quite a while now. And that's me showing my respect and appreciation to my favorite pilot of all time, Days Gone By. Days Gone By premiered on Halloween night of 2010 and garnered over 5 million live viewers. At the time of this recording, Days Gone By currently has a 9.2 rating on IMDb with over 31,000 reviews. And if you didn't realize that, that's like extremely good. I constantly see praise for this episode even by people who aren't the biggest fans of the Walking Dead franchise, and unfortunately, that's the majority of people nowadays. But why is that? What makes this episode of television so special? Well, I may be a bit biased since The Walking Dead is my favorite show and franchise of all time, but I like to think this episode deserves all the praise it gets and even more. I feel like I can't add on anything that hasn't already been said about this episode, but I will try my absolute best. So in my own personal opinion, this is why I think The Walking Dead's pilot needs to be studied. First off, the way the episode slowly opens with a vacant road as a police car slowly emerges is just brilliant. There's absolutely no dialogue spoken, and we're just dropped into the middle of this random highway on a random day with absolutely no context. We then quickly realize, as the title of the series suggests, that this is an apocalyptic story as we see our leading man travel through an abandoned gas station with lots and lots of vehicles that seem to have been here for quite some time, meaning that the apocalypse has already started and is also well established by this point in the story. This is confirmed when we see our first walker of the series, Summer, played by Addie Miller. Summer is one of the most iconic walkers we see in the whole series for multiple reasons. She's the first on-screen zombie we ever see, and she's holding a teddy bear, which means that she's a variant as explained in the final episodes of the series. And most importantly, she immediately establishes what kind of show this is going to be as we see her get put down as her body hits the ground and her stuffed animal goes flying. This isn't a standard episode of television. This scene directly leads into the iconic opening and title theme composed by Bear McCreary, which perfectly encapsulates the tone of the series, even farther depicting dark imagery and crediting the main cast overlaid with horror-inspired music. We then cut back to a scene that predates the outbreak. We quickly learn these two men's names are Rick and Shane. They're both policemen in a small town and seem to be good friends, and Rick states that he has been having relationship issues with his wife Lori. I appreciate the seed being planted this early on because this information is definitely important for later. The boys in blue get called away to a speeding car chase where we finally get to meet our actual main characters, Leon Bassett and Officer Lamb.
Bruh.
Seriously though, how did Lamb get such a cult following on TikTok back in like 2022? Anyways, the King County Police managed to stop the car, causing it to crash, but the passengers don't go down without a fight. Rick gets shot in the heat of the battle, but thankfully he's wearing a vest. The police successfully save the day and none of them get hurt. Wait, you're telling me there's 56 minutes left of this episode? Damn, okay. Rick speaks too soon because he's shot again in the shoulder where he wasn't covered by his vest. All jokes aside, I absolutely love this moment because it's somewhat of a misdirect for comic fans watching for the first time to make them think the events of the series may start somewhat differently. Rick fades into his coma and we start the series we all know and love. Rick does wake up, only 59 days later, and quickly sees how deteriorated the hospital is in its current state. I feel like I don't even need to explain much for why this sequence deserves praise. Everything is top tier with the overall tone, camera work, set design, and especially Andy's reactions. This is when Rick sees his first corpse, and fortunately for him, it's not alive. And of course, I can't just not talk about Rick walking down the don't open dead inside hallway. I mean, when they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, I think of this scene right here. Rick walking barefoot directly on the debris wearing nothing but a hospital gown, the ceiling caving in, Rick slowly going towards the doors that scream impending doom. Andrew Lincoln and Frank Darabont absolutely cooked with this whole sequence.
Someone cooked here.
Rick eventually makes it outside and sees hundreds upon hundreds of corpses. I personally couldn't even imagine what it would be like to be in this situation. However, I think Andrew Lincoln perfectly conveys an array of emotions without even having to say a word. I guess Rick is tired of being barefoot, so he picks up a bicycle, but not without seeing another iconic ass walker that is. Of course, Bicycle Girl. Rick makes it home and obviously no one is there. It's the apocalypse, bruh. And here I'm going to absolutely glaze Andrew Lincoln's performance once again because he brings his A game through this entire episode, but especially this scene when he's questioning his sanity and reality.
Is this real? Am I here?
Wake up.
Rick walks outside and sees his first walking walker, technically, but he's blinded by the sun, so he thinks it's an actual living person. I love this misdirect right here as we see a figure approaching Rick because the audience assumes it's a zombie, but it's anything but as Rick gets hit in the face with a shovel and Rick in a daze mistakes the boy for Carl. This is when we're introduced to a fan favorite The Walking Dead character, Morgan Jones, and his son Dwayne as Morgan shoots the walker and Rick passes out. Morgan's about to explain everything about the wildfire outbreak to Rick and the audience as well, which I think was the perfect way to deliver exposition for this newly changed world. Morgan is demanding to know if Rick got bit, but Rick tries to convince him again and again that he just got shot and didn't get any other injuries. I love the setting of the Joneses' makeshift house because although all of this scene just takes place in a normal standard looking house, you really get the feel that this world that we once knew is all gone, with the windows being covered and handheld lanterns being used, and also the storage of food and water just being out in the open. I really like the overall green and yellow tones of the house. It just looks so good on the 16mm film. When Rick finally walks out, he immediately recognizes the house as Fred and Sydney Drake's, and I like this detail because it just reiterates to the audience that Rick is from a small area and knew everyone in the community. This is when Rick and we as the audience learn one of the most important facts about the zombies in this universe. They're attracted to sound, which draws them into groups. They're grouped right outside the house, and Morgan advises Rick to not open the windows so the walkers aren't drawn to the light in the house. Speaking of walkers, this is when we first hear Morgan say the term, and the survivors throughout the remainder of the series will continue to mainly use this term to describe the dead. This is also when Morgan describes how to take down walkers. They only go down with headshots.
Boom! Headshot!
As Rick is explaining to Morgan and Dwayne that he's a sheriff's deputy and not a bank robber, a walker from outside bumps a car, causing it to sound the alarms, which in turn causes more walkers to group up. This causes a specific walker to show up on the doorstep of the home, which is revealed to be Jenny, Morgan's wife who died and turned. Jenny is also one of the most iconic walkers because of how creepily she moves as she stares down the peephole and turns the doorknob completely on her own. Before we fade into the next morning, we get a specific look from Rick that makes it seem like he's wondering if his wife has suffered the same fate as Morgan's. The next morning is when we see Rick actually take out his first walker, which is quite the struggle for him at first. This is another reason why I love the decision to make the protagonist be in a coma for the first 2 months of the outbreak, because while the rest of our characters have slowly adjusted to this world, Rick is experiencing absolutely everything for the first time, and you already know I'm going to praise Andrew Lincoln's performance once again. Rick takes the pair back to his house to show them why he's fully convinced his family is alive. He explains to Morgan that since there's no family portraits or pictures in the house, he knows for a fact that Lori and Carl were at least alive when they left. This is when Morgan and Dwayne tell Rick to leave and go look for them in Atlanta, and that there was a refugee center set up at the very start of the outbreak, and the CDC is also mentioned, which foreshadows the season's finale. Before Rick heads into the city, he makes a stop at his place of work, the police station, and brings Morgan and Dwayne along to get cleaned up and to stock up on supplies. Rick gives Morgan a rifle and a radio to contact him every morning, but I'm sure these items won't be important later on. Before they separate, Morgan tells Rick that the walkers aren't much of a threat, one at a time, but if they group up, that he needs to be careful.
They may not seem like much one at a time, but in a group all riled up and hungry, man, you watch your ass.
And this is when The Walking Dead pulls a Game of Thrones, because in the very first episode, they kill off their main character, Leon Bassett.
What?
Rick is finally on his way to hopefully find his family, but not before making a couple pit stops. He returns the bicycle girl to properly put her down and apologizes for what happened to her. This scene is also intermixed with Morgan attempting but failing to put down his reanimated wife, and I just can't get over how brilliantly put together this sequence is, seeing the two main characters of the pilot struggling to come to terms with the world of the outbreak. I've praised Andy time and time again, but it's also time for me to give Lenny James his flowers because he does such a damn good job as well. The casting directors absolutely could not have done better when it comes to these two. This whole pilot relies pretty much on these two roles, and I don't think it would be praised anywhere near as much if it wasn't for their top-notch performances. We cut to Rick making his way to Atlanta, and he's attempting to contact absolutely anyone on the radio. This is when we see this random blonde girl actually hear the message and try to talk, but there's interference. This guy then slams down his axe. And what do you know? It's the dude from the beginning of the episode. Little does Shane know that his former partner is on the other end of the radio. Unfortunately for Rick, it seems like the city is extremely dangerous as the people at the camp say they should have gone through with putting up signs and warning people away from the city. Shane and this woman argue about their problems for a bit before making up and making out before being interrupted by her son. We then go back to Rick's car when the audience is hit with the realization that this is Lori and Carl. These 2 months have not been kind to Rick and he doesn't even know the half of it. I love the way this reveal was done because it's the perfect way for us to 1, meet Carl and Lori and see them on screen for the first time, and 2, for us to realize that even if Rick finds his family, all of his problems aren't just going to suddenly disappear. The Walking Dead just became a family drama. It's also the perfect excuse for Rick to be taking this picture along with him because he suddenly runs out of gas and has to make the rest of the trip on foot, for now at least. Now it makes sense why Rick was looking for gas earlier, and now we have complete context for the cold open. Rick walks up to this house looking for gas, and to no one but Rick's surprise, he walks up upon a bloody hell if I've ever seen one. Rick has to take a moment to himself, which is just another small instance of him coming to terms with the world he now lives in, and just when he's about to give up on gas, he realizes there's a perfectly good horse for him to ride. Rick tells this horse all it needs to hear to try to convince it to let them go to Atlanta, and it works. Is your favorite fictional character a horse whisperer? I didn't think so. The pair ride off towards the city, and apparently the hat actually flew off of Lincoln in this shot, and I almost don't believe that, just because of how good and how real the hat on him looks. I don't know how hard it is to mask out a flying hat and then replace it on the head, but for television standards, and for a show that's literally just starting, I think that's extremely impressive VFX. And here we are. This scene right here. If you didn't think I was going to make a big deal out of this shot, you are absolutely delusional. If what I said earlier about Rick walking up to the don't open dead inside doors being worth 1,000 words is true, then this scene is worth like 1,000,000. It's that good. This very image right here just may be the most iconic shot of The Walking Dead. It tells a whole story. You see the skyline of a broken Atlanta, the long broken road in front of Rick, the vehicles all trying to escape the city, Rick being on fucking horseback, just absolutely brilliant. And the fact that this shot is the main poster for the first season, they couldn't have gone with a better image to promote their show. Enough yapping about one specific shot. Rick makes his way into the city and obviously quickly realizes that it's pretty much empty. I truly wish we got to spend more time actually in Atlanta in the show because this is when I think The Walking Dead is at its best, seeing huge rundown cities like this. When Rick pisses off a couple walkers that start to follow him, he passes a tank, which is a crazy sight to see in the middle of the road in the city. But then all of a sudden he hears something in the sky, and in the reflection of one of the skyscrapers, he sees what seems to be a helicopter, although he never actually lays eyes on it himself. This doesn't have to do with the pilot itself, but this may have been some insane intentional foreshadowing for farther down the line in the universe. Rick immediately chases the helicopter, but all of a sudden learns that walkers get thirsty too. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, he's actually screwed because there are hundreds and hundreds of walkers around the corner, and Rick realizes immediately what Morgan meant earlier. Rick tries to run away, but is immediately surrounded, and this is when we get our second main character death, the Days Gone By horse, which quickly becomes a tasty snack. The horse being a snack actually saves Rick's life though, because he immediately gets away and crawls under the tank, but the walkers obviously follow him. We see him fire exactly 5 shots before contemplating taking himself out. Now I don't know if this is intentional or it's just bad ADR, but I absolutely love how we actually get to hear the inside of Rick's mind rather than this being spoken dialogue.
Lori, Carl, I'm sorry.
Seconds before he pulls the trigger, Rick looks up and sees an opening in the bottom of the tank. He's relieved to be alive and cuddles up next to Sam Witwer as a walker, who never got his standalone episode like he was going to in Season 2, but that's besides the point. Rick quickly has to use his last bullet because the walker quickly comes to life and tries to eat him. Rick wigs out due to the close range shot .2 away from his ear for a bit until he realizes he needs to shut the hatch at the top of the tank where the previously established walker from inside the bus creepily looks at him for a second. It's not looking good for our hero. He's completely surrounded with little to no ammo in a confined space. He takes a moment to process the past couple of days he's experienced when he's interrupted by radio static and then a voice.
Dumbass. Yeah, you in the tank. Cozy in there?
Space Junk by Wang Chung plays behind an aerial shot of the horse being eaten and Rick being surrounded by the walkers in the tank. The lyrics of Space Junk perfectly describes Rick's newfound situation. Welcome to my world, welcome to my only world. This is Rick's life whether he accepts it or not, and it seems that things will never go back to how they were. The episode ends and the credits roll. What else can I say besides what a masterpiece episode of television? Days Gone By cemented itself by being one of the best episodes of The Walking Dead and one of the overall best pilots of all time by being beautifully shot and directed, having unexpected reveals and top-notch writing, and having well-acted leads that are an absolute joy to follow. Just within the span of 67 minutes, we as the audience care about Rick Grimes and want him to succeed in his journey, even when all the odds are stacked against him. I first watched this episode in 2015 and absolutely fell in love with The Walking Dead. Rick Grimes is my favorite fictional character of all time, and as I've previously mentioned, The Walking Dead is my favorite franchise, even beyond the show. If it wasn't for this pilot, none of that would be possible. So as an avid fan of this universe, I just want to thank everyone involved with the production of not only this pilot, but the show, graphic novel, games, merchandise, and absolutely anything and everything. I couldn't imagine my life without The Walking Dead in it, and I'm sure a lot of fans feel the exact same way that I do. If you enjoyed the video and want to support me and my channel, please consider subscribing and also pledging to my Patreon. As of this very moment, we only have one member, my good friend Talia, but as I continue to hopefully release more and more long-form content, I bet we can get more and more members. Members will get shoutouts at the end of all my videos, join my exclusive Discord server, and even get early access to videos, all for just $1. As I continue making content, I'll listen to feedback for what you guys want and may even add more tiers in the future. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching and see you guys in the next one.